What's going on, my people? Welcome back to another episode of the Stop the Count podcast. In this episode, I'll talk about the amazing UFC card that awaits us, a little bit about boxing, and also Chivas' next game versus Juarez. First, for boxing, there really isn't any quote-unquote big names fighting this weekend, as Artur Beterbiev versus Callum Smith was cancelled and rescheduled for January of next year, as Beterbiev had problems with a dental procedure he had done. And the card that is going on is a Matchroom card with many up-and-coming fighters on it. It's headlined by a fighter many people don't know yet, but soon they will, as two-time Olympian, one-time Olympic gold medalist Galalyafai goes up against Tommy Franks in another great step-up fight for Yafai. I'm not very excited for any other prospect on the card, so I'll only talk a little bit about the main event, Galalyafai versus Tommy Franks. Frank was at one point in time seen as one of the best lower weight class British prospects, but his career has recently taken a bad turn. After starting his career 13-0, he has gone on to have a record of 2 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw in his last 6 fights. And in this fight, it's not getting any easier for Tommy. Yafai is a great boxer. He has everything, really, from the boxing skill to power. Yafai is on the verge of breaking out and challenging for a world title, in my opinion. And I honestly don't feel this fight can stop that from happening. I'm not saying Yafai is going to walk through Tommy, but I actually think Tommy is a tougher fighter, and he's not going to make this fight easy, but obviously he's going to take this fight straight to Yafai, but Galalyafai is a different level fighter, and I believe Galalyafai will be victorious by knockout. Now for the UFC 292 card, headlined by Aljamainsterling defending his bantamweight championship against Sean O'Malley. This fight card is amazing. From the early prelims to the pay-per-view main event, this card isn't going to disappoint. First, I'll talk about some fights and fighters on this card I'll be looking forward to. Besides the tough finalist in which bantamweight Brad Katona takes on Cody Gibson, and lightweight Austin Hubbard takes on Kurt Holobaugh. But now for the fighters that are officially on the UFC roster, starting with a former UFC champion coming off of a nasty injury, and that is chrisweidman. This will be Chris's first fight since that injury over 2 years ago. Chris is fighting a tough opponent in Bradtavares, and Brad himself is coming off of 2 straight losses, and there's no doubt he's going to come out and want to show that he still belongs in the UFC. Former TUF semifinalist Andre Petroski is also on the card, and since losing in the TUF semifinal to eventual winner Brian Battle, Andre has been on a tear, winning 4 fights in a row, the first 3 by finish and the latest a unanimous decision. Opening up the pay-per-view portion of the card is Marlon Chitovera versus pedromunhoz. Chito is coming off of a pretty bad performance that got him a decision loss to Corey Sandhagen, as it looked as if in the first couple rounds Chito wasn't able to turn it on and do anything. Eventually Chito was able to get it going, but it was just too late. As for Pedro, he's coming off of a great performance that got him a decision win over Chris Gutierrez. It was a very good fight. Both fighters had their moments, but getting back to Chito versus Pedro, they are both all-around good fighters, but I think Chito will be too much for Pedro, and Chito will win a decision. Codygarbrandt was also supposed to be on this card and fighting a very tough opponent in mariobautista, but Cody unfortunately had to pull out of the fight, and he will be replaced by damonblackshear. Yes, this will be Blackshear's second fight in a week, and it will be a great fight. I'm expecting a great ground fight from these two. There's also a great showcase fight the UFC are putting on for iangarry, the undefeated welterweight prospect. Ian was supposed to go up against Jeff Neal, but Neal was forced to pull out of this fight, and Ian will now face neilmagny. Ian is one of the best prospects in the UFC right now. He's at his best on his feet, and hopefully he can show us some development on the ground this fight. We must also remember, Ian has been hurt before. He has to stay focused. Neil hasn't been knocked out since 2018, and in 2 of his last 4 fights, he's lost by submission. I believe Ian will get the win. But now for the first of 2 title fights we have on this night. Zhangweili versus amandalemos for Zhang's strawweight title. This fight is going to be amazing. I'll start off by talking about Amanda. Amanda is a badass. She has only lost 2 times in her UFC career. Her last loss came to Jessica Andrade, and since then, she has won 2 fights in a row. Amanda is a great all-around fighter. Her kicks are very important for how she fights, and her jiu-jitsu is some of the best from this women's strawweight division. There is times where Amanda gets kind of crazy, and that could lead to her getting taken down by Zhang, and that's exactly how she lost versus Andrade. Amanda started throwing crazy, and Andrade got her in a fight-ending submission. Now talking about champion zhangweili. Zhang is a beast, having only lost twice to Rose Namajunas in her UFC career. And since her last loss to Rose, she has been on a 2-fight win streak, as her last fight was a complete domination over 2 rounds of former champion Carla Esparza. Zhang is so fucking dangerous. She's so good on the feet. She's a beast, but even on the ground, she's dangerous as fuck with her elbows and submission attempts, and I don't see her losing this fight. If I were to pick a winner, it would obviously be Zhang Weili by knockout. She's quite possibly the best woman fighter in the UFC right now. And now for the main event. Sean O'Malley challenges Aljamain Sterling for Sterling's bantamweight title. This fight has been a long time coming for most UFC fans, as these two have been exchanging shots back and forth on social media for quite some time. First, talking about Sean O'Malley. In Sean's last 5 fights, he has a record of 4 wins and 1 no contest due to an eye poke. He has 1 loss in his UFC career that came to fellow contender Chitovera a little over 3 years ago. And yes, he was finished. Fuck all that bullshit people say about it not being a true loss. And if Dana White privilege was in the dictionary, the description would be a picture of Sean. This guy was ranked the number 11 bantamweight and had the opportunity to fight the number 1 ranked bantamweight in Petr Yan. And in my opinion, he lost that fight. And it's not only that, Sean decided to not fight anyone and gave up his title shot to an Olympic wrestler and Henry Cejudo, who Aljo obviously beat. And then to top it off, the UFC basically forced Aljo to fight Sean this soon after his last title defense. If Aljo wouldn't have taken this fight, Sean would have been fighting for an interim, if not vacant, title. To me, that's bullshit. It's been 14 weeks since Aljo's last fight versus Henry. Now, a training camp is usually 10 weeks. Aljo had 4 weeks off of rest from a 10-week camp and a 5-round fight against the great fighter in Henry Cejudo. But talking about how I see this fight going for Sean, Sean's very dangerous on the feet. He's very long and lanky. Everything he throws has power behind it. Sean's very creative, and he will be the taller fighter, as he is against all bantamweights, but the reach is about the same. I think Sean might have maybe a 1-inch reach advantage. Sean's kicks, in my opinion, are going to be his best way to victory. Sean's going to really have to show an improvement in his takedown defense and ground game, because Petr Yan, a fighter that's not known for his ground game, was able to really show that weakness in Sean's game. And that's not even talking about what Yan was able to do on the feet against someone who's the best on the feet. Aljo is going to go into this fight with one objective, and that is going to be take Sean down and tire him out. But now talking about champion Aljamain Sterling. Aljo is what many people see as the best bantamweight of all time, but to me, he'll always be number 2, behind Dominic Cruz, who growing up was my favorite fighter. Aljo is currently on a 9-fight win streak, with his last loss coming to Marlon Moraes by knockout in the great city of Fresno almost 6 years ago. But now how I see this fight going for Aljo is going to have to be very careful on how he attacks with his kicks and knees, because Aljo could get kind of reckless at times and he leaves his chin out there. And against someone like Sean, 1 shot might be enough to put your lights out. Now, Aljo is not Merab. He doesn't just spam takedowns, he tries to show off his stand-up, and against someone like Sean, it wouldn't hurt to be more like Merab and less like Joe Pyfer. Aljo will be very active in the first rounds and try to tire Sean out early. Aljo is not a fighter that looks for submissions, but for control time and ground strikes. But for who I have winning this fight, I actually think this fight is a lot closer than what most people think. But I still think Aljamain Sterling will get the decision victory. But now talking about Chivas and the situation that has been going around about there being a couple fights in the locker room after the horrible Leagues Cup performance. If you want to see the original video I seen, go check out Futbol con Cerebro's video on it. But just to summarize what happens, it looks as if the team is split after a harsh yelling by Paunovic. That caused the rift between the team, one in favor of Paunovic and the other one not wanting to be yelled at like that from the coach. And in my opinion, the players that don't want to be yelled at need to realize Paunovic is the man in charge. If he feels they deserve to be yelled at, it's for a reason. They played horribly in the Leagues Cup. It was also said Nenebeltran got into a very tense and verbal altercation with Pochoguzman and Chivas' new signing Eric Gutierrez. And if you were to ask me, as someone who's played team sports their whole life, I would say this is normal. It happens. It's a locker room full of men who don't want to lose, that just lost 2 games in a row and in horrible fashion. I would be disappointed if they wouldn't be mad at each other after the horrible performance from the midfield. But now getting into their game, Chivas get back in league action this Friday and play FC Juarez. Viernes Botanero in full effect. This game is going to be sick. Two great teams playing each other. In their last 5 meetings against each other, Chivas have a record of 3 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. Chivas won the last meeting 2-1, but as of right now, Juarez obviously had a way better Leagues Cup than Chivas, as most teams did. But even then, Juarez lost to LAFC 7-1. That takes nothing away from Juarez. They just weren't the better team on that night. They're still third place in the Liga MX standings with 7 points. Juarez before the Leagues Cup were playing amazing, beating America and Toluca and getting a draw versus Tigres. They've scored in each game, and against Toluca, they were able to score 4 goals. I've been watching a lot of their games due to Chivas loanee Sebastianperezbouquet being on the team, and oh boy is he something. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to score his first goal with Juarez against Chivas, but there's no doubt in my mind that he will play good. Diegocampillo is another Chivas canterano on loan at Juarez, and he's had very little action as he's barely joining the team due to being with the Selección Mexicana's U23 team in the Central American Games. Their obvious weak spot is their defense. They have yet to play a game and keep the opposing team scoreless. Now for Chivas, Chicotecalderon will be missing as he's dealing with a muscle injury, and that might leave him out of action for quite some time. And this, in my opinion, is where mateochavez has to step in. Alejandromayorga has had his chances and he never seems to solidify himself in the starting lineup. But if Paunovic puts Chiquito Rosco in this position, it still wouldn't be a bad thing to go into this game with the same defensive line Chivas had in the past Liguilla. There has also been speculation that alanmozo will be benched and chapitosanchez will get the start, and to be honest, that should not be happening. Chapitosanchez has done nothing in recent memory for Chivas. He's celebrating 13 years with the club this month, but honestly, his Chivas tenure shouldn't have passed 10 years. He's made no history with the club. He's living off of a campeonato he played a minimal role in. I'm really hoping Chivas make no big changes besides Chicote, but besides that, I really just want to see what changes Paunovic has made over the almost 3 weeks of no action. If I were to make a prediction, I would say a 4-2 scoreline and Chivas being the winners. But besides what my predicted scoreline may suggest, this game will be close as hell. Juarez have so much speed and are going to be looking to counter, which has always been a weakness for Chivas. Nonetheless, Chivas win this game, shutting up the critics and making all of you idiots fans again. Milan also start their season off next Monday against Bologna, and I wasn't a big fan of their summer window. I think this will be a very difficult season, but Milan will start off on the right foot with a 2-1 win. Also, if you follow me on Twitter, you would see I watch a lot of European football games. Keep up with me on there or let me know if I should start talking about them more and make a separate video a week talking about the big football games every weekend. That's going to be it for me. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also follow me on Twitter at StopTheCount10. See you guys next week as I talk about what went down in these fights. See you then.